Welcome to another episode of Bourbon and Data Breaches, where we cover 5 of the most interesting data breaches from this last week and one of our favorite bourbons. I'm Steve.
I'm Gabby.
Divya.
Carter.
Luke.
And I'm John.
Paul.
Great. Welcome to our new cast members. So Divya, what happened this week?
All right, first story of the evening and 2023, because this is the first episode of BNB this year. The first story is AT&T is deciding to sell off its cybersecurity business. This is the report. Their strategy is to put all its chips on its core telecom business, and they are reportedly considering the sale of its 5-year-old cybersecurity business unit. I just want to add to this. I've been getting a lot of emails from AT&T cybersecurity and asking me to purchase them. So what do you guys feel about this story?
So this hits close to home because AT&T is in Dallas, and I know a number of people that worked for Alien Vaults, either in a prior life or recently left them. So the Austin cyber scene has a number of Alien Vault people in it.
Yeah.
I think it's surprising, right? I think that AT&T and Alien Vault put in a lot of work to build up a good brand, and it's weird that this day and age they would want to get out of the cyber business when everyone's getting into it.
Yeah, I mean, when you operate one of the largest tier 1 networks on Earth and you allocate, a quarter of the IP addresses on Earth or something or whatever, it's such a natural combo with something like Alien Vault. I mean, why would you do that?
So it seems so much like another large technology company that does this whole, let's go buy something, let's integrate it, let's put it under our brand and then resell it 5 years later. I don't know, another 3-letter acronym, might start with an I, end with a BM, that does the same exact thing.
Yeah, I think it does end with
Yeah, that was very intentional. Don't you worry.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Well, do you think this sends the message, Paul? Like you said, they are arguably one of the largest networks on the planet. Do you think this sends the message that they care less about security now?
Wow, I never thought of that, but that's quite a zinger. The thing is, from their position, just in control of the assets they're in control of, they could probably do more to help people with security than any other 10 people on Earth, right? So you think companies on Earth. So,
But so
I don't know. But you know what? The
it,
bean counters may not care. Who cares?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is, I'll bet you they had a hard time with sales from a holistic perspective, because all of a sudden your network provider, all of this is now owned by one company.
Right.
And all of a sudden it becomes all eggs in one basket. And it's hard to differentiate that. So they probably had a hard time with sales and probably saw an opportunity to say, hey, if we spin this off, there's a bigger opportunity for us to partner with these people, et cetera.
John, that's a really good point, because I've dealt extensively with them and with Vodafone. And there's an old adage, the only thing a carrier can sell is more minutes.
Right.
Or more bandwidth. And it's pretty much true. And so maybe that's just what happened here, I don't know.
So I would guess here this deal, and I know nothing about the actual deal itself, is going to be something along the lines of, we'll sell it off, but guess what? We get 50% of every partner deal that we do with you, and we can partner with you, right? So they're probably looking at this as a sales opportunity. It's nothing to do with increasing security. I think it's probably a big miss, because as Paul said, the opportunity was there to increase security for people all across the world.
Right.
So I have one question. As we all know, T-Mobile's been breached like 8 times in like the last 2 quarters. Whatever.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised even if it was 2 quarters.
It's T-Mobile has had some data breaches.
So
So far, this is what we've counted.
So how does that kind of like play into the strategy of AT&T trying to sell their cybersecurity unit?
it seems weird. I would expect everyone to want to increase their cybersecurity, especially if you're in telecom. People are relying on telecom all the more in ways they didn't used to, especially with
Right.
5G. The whole trend is for local networks to go away and everyone to rely on 5G. And with that comes a huge security concern. So I think this is a bad move. I think this sends the wrong signal. And I would not say it's a bad move for T-Mobile to buy Alien Vault from AT&T, because guess who needs to show that they are putting more emphasis on security? T-Mobile. So, you know, to your point, it may be a sales issue, but I find it weird. It's also the exact opposite strategy of Microsoft. Microsoft is, we are the one place you need to go for your OS, your browser, your security, all of it. I don't really get what AT&T does if they just have cell phone providers and internet.
I would agree. I think that's a very valid point, and it's interesting because I come from a world, right, of financial background where they really moved from a fiber core, which would be AT&T's real business, to having fiber core with a 5G backup for all like ATMs, bank sites, teller sites, etc. So it's really interesting that you say that you kind of bring up the 5G thing, because that is the next generation of, that's our backup network. Even if it's not your primary network, it's your backup network, and they have the network to provide that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that.
That is our emergency backup, is we have a T-Mobile 5G MiFi, and if the internet's ever down, like, people can still have enough internet to keep working.
Right. And a little happy reminder to that point, you guys, is that most of the largest networks in that top 10 tier 1 network group, they built out their 5G infrastructure with Huawei, right? So that's pretty funny. The only ones who haven't are the ones in America who are like 2 generations behind the other guys.
Well, if you've seen what I've seen in terms of Chinese companies putting mystery chips into hardware,
Yeah,
you would feel much better on a US network.
100%.
The number of chips that suddenly get added to Chinese hardware, that there's no explanation for it. So yeah, like I think,
and it's really interesting. All of those chips have little inflatable latex things that float them up into the air.
Right. That's another story.
Upon demand.
Yeah, they
Sorry,
deliver
maybe
software patches
maybe
to
too
your
soon.
Story number 2, you guys, personal favorite because I'm personally victimized by it. European Commission bans TikTok from employees' phones, citing cybersecurity threat. Now, I want you guys to note that Europe has actually acted a little behind of the United States, because federal employees, like I think a couple months ago, were asked to stop having TikTok on their phones.
I actually recently heard about a large university in a state called Florida who have banned TikTok from any of their students using it on campus, which is so interesting.
Is that legal?
I would love to know.
It's probably for a different reason, though.
That feels like an ACLU issue.
Well, it is. It's because, well, yeah.
No,
I feel like Paul has a lot of context here that
Say
he's
it,
refusing to share with us.
That sounds, yeah. So okay. Here's the world we're in. ByteDance bought Musical.ly, a US company. All right.
Oh.
And the US allowed that to happen. Now, the US at the time didn't care, but turns out that Musical.ly was the next generation of social media that was going to take over. Now the US cares a lot because ByteDance is Chinese owned and operated, and China has access to incredible data from all of the interactions on TikTok. We've heard in the past, US soldiers at secret locations have been posting TikTok and disclosing secret locations. You can see the inside of army bases on TikTok. TikTok has a lot of information that I'm sure the Chinese government would like to have access to, and they're basically turning it over for free. Now, the same problems existed with Facebook, but Facebook is US based, right? But there's so much information that's just going onto Facebook that's classified or secret or should be classified. So like, yeah, we're banning TikTok, but like the cat's out of the bag. Like,
Right.
what are you gonna do?
So Steve, let me just ask you, so if you think about the permissions and the access just in a handset, a mobile phone handset. So when you sign the user agreement for an Apple or an Android phone, you give Apple or Google permission to turn it on, record it, do anything they want anyway, right?
Your iPhone now, even when it's off,
Yeah,
send out homing signals.
correct. So it's nuts. And we give them permission. If you want to use a phone, you have to do it. So whatever.
That's even if
But here's the thing, right? From a governance compliance perspective, like no third-party app at this point, really, unless it's fully justified, should be on government-issued phones, right? Like, if your company doesn't want it, they prevent it.
Yeah.
If the government doesn't want it, it never should have been installed in the first place.
Correct.
But like, what about like apps like Twitter or something, which is used for spreading news?
My taxpayer dollars are paying for that. Why are they on Twitter? Why are they on Facebook?
Hold on. Government is business, and business uses a wide range of apps that are not approved by the IT department and not approved by government officials.
Right.
If you think that government doesn't use Twitter, like Twitter search now, right? You can search things on Twitter and get a better answer than you can on Google. Same thing with ChatGPT. Tell me the government is not currently using ChatGPT, because it should be, right? But
I'm sure they're actually on ChatGPT version 4.
what are the security? But what are the security implications? Because every interaction you have with ChatGPT is available to OpenAI to read, review, and use.
Correct.
And it's a very selective user base that should be able to use those types of things.
But it isn't. But it isn't.
I agreed. That's how it happens. But it should be role based. That these are the people. They sign certain non-disclosures. They sign certain things that this is what's being used. Twitter and TikTok should not be widely available on every government phone.
Well, here's the thing, John. Like, I mean, I personally, like, for example, I have a TikTok account, right? But I've never been in a situation where I would go in my interview at a future like workplace and my boss on the second day knows about my TikTok handle. That's never happened to me.
Oh, we know about Divya.
Oh, it's changed now, but he found
Oh, okay.
We know everything.
So he knows about it again, and I like kind of like removed him from the whole thing. I even changed my username, but he still found out that like I have a TikTok account with a very spicy name. So I think that's a little bit.
I'm going on the hunt.
So I think the argument I have against what you said, John, is you can't bottle the future. The future will permeate into every business and every role, whether you like it or not. That's why Shadow IT exists. Shadow IT is the security team didn't approve fast enough what I needed to get my job done, and so I'm just going to do it without their approval. And ChatGPT helps every single job be better. And if you aren't building policies, assuming your employees are using ChatGPT, they'll just do it against your will.
Right.
I would agree with you. I think that the key is you have to build those policies so they're more generic. You have to disable things whitelist and enable those who need it to utilize it. And then at that point, once something is needed or necessary, shadow IT, yes, comes up. But we're sitting here looking at TikTok, what, 6 years later? I mean, 10 years later, I don't even know when TikTok was launched, right? The problem is this should have been brought up so much further in the forefront,
Right.
because we would have had whitelist policies to say, yes, this person could or could not do it, versus we're looking at it now because it's been widespread, holistic throughout the, government issued phones. And now we're trying to retract all that, right?
I think it's policy and it's people. I think policy is going to fail you every single time if you make it too restrictive.
Yeah.
I think you need to teach people to not put sensitive and classified information into ChatGPT or into TikTok. I think if you build rules, people will find ways around those rules.
100%.
Rules, it's hard to get people to understand that it can be a security risk.
And I think there's another factor here, and it's sort of an inertial thing, and it's a bit cynical, but if you think of the $500 billion attention market, for internet advertising. So the internet is structured, and the connections and the whole infrastructure, it all works to service the ad market at the moment. So if there's another opportunity for more clicks and more dollars to flow, that has a certain amount of momentum that's going to be hard to change. It may change it, but it's going to be hard to change it.
The only rebuttal I would give you on Steve about that is what you said to me was, if the policy is therefore broken, the policy is written and therefore broken, you can then address it then, as opposed to there was no policy to be broken. So now we are reacting to it because no policy was broken. If the policy was there, we'd have an opportunity to address it then.
Unless you're in a clean room that doesn't have access to the internet, it is disassociative with reality to assume your employees won't use the internet for their job. It's just, you're building policies assuming they're going to follow the policy when the internet's right there and available. Like, good luck.
Policymakers also have to be properly educated. I think the individual responsibility, individual education is more vital than policy. But who do we have in the Texas government, for example, making decisions about TikTok regulations, which isn't just a one-liner decision, it's probably some large kind of guideline. Are they being consulted by people with experience? A lot of policymakers don't know anything about cybersecurity. They've been working on building roads or taking care of healthcare for homeless people for decades, and cybersecurity is new and it's changing all the time.
Yep. All right, great. We're gonna move on to the bourbon break. So bourbon is an old favorite. Today we have Maker's Mark. This is actually a normal size bottle. Sometimes they have teeny bottles you can buy, but this is the proper size you should buy. So Maker's Mark, we're having the standard Maker's Mark, which is a 90 proof. This is a 1.75 liter, which I feel like is a good weekly supply of Makers. Tell us about Makers.
Okay, so here's the thing. Maker's Mark is the only bourbon that I've had and I've actually enjoyed. So I am very excited to cover this. Loving the little red top over here with the dropping wax seal thing going on over here. Super cool. Maker's Mark bourbon whiskey. It's a product information says that it's Kentucky smooth and approachable with an easy finish, a true contrast to hot, harsh whiskeys that blow your ears off, and a downright revolutionary idea at the time. Maker's Mark is made slowly in small batches in our National Historic Landmark Distillery in Loretto, Kentucky. Taste says that it's rich caramel, vanilla, oak, and balanced. Spirit style, it's a small batch bourbon, obviously from Kentucky. Loving some of the reviews over here, learning a lesson, and all the bourbons for the money, it's my go-to bourbon. So Steve, this being the only bourbon I've actually ever tasted,
Mhm.
what are your comments?
Yeah, so Maker's Mark is an old favorite. This is they can call it small batch, but I feel like that's leaning pretty hard into the wind there because they're making it in giant vats. This is not their cask strength. This is not a single barrel. This is just Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark originally came out with an ad campaign saying it tastes expensive because it is. So they tried to separate themselves as a more expensive bourbon, but I think along the way they've dropped their price and it's actually quite reasonable. I get some semi-sweetness on the nose. I do get maybe a little bit of vanilla. I don't know about others.
I'm kind of getting a little honey.
Honey?
Okay.
Great copywriting on the bottle. Two sides, really good,
Really?
and very evocative, yeah.
First
Should read
Bourbon
some.
and Breaches of 2023. I'm curious, as a non-native bourbon drinker, I'm curious, when you drink a bourbon, what are you looking out for? What are we looking for here?
Yeah.
Score.
Yeah, so I think that Maker's Mark hits a lot of the items I'm looking for. I'm looking for a bourbon that's smooth, not overly hot. I'm looking for a bourbon that has some interesting notes on the palate, usually some sort of wood element to it, some sweetness to it. Maybe a little spice, a little rye spice, or some caramely or sugary from wheat. So Maker's Mark is a wheated bourbon, and so you get like a nice little roundness on the mouth from the wheated. Usually Makers, I would be making a highball out of it. Makes a great highball, and not usually sipping it. I go for other things for sipping that maybe have a little bit more complexity. But this is just a solid bourbon, a solid mainstay. And if I found this at a bar, like it's a go-to, right? You can reliably get it. So I would say this is a solid like 7 out of 10. For the price, it's a no-brainer. And I think this would be a good part of any liquor cabinet, probably for like highballs, mixed drinks, and then it's not bad for sipping.
Mhm.
Gabby, what are your thoughts?
I'm feeling the heat, when I first sip it, I
Uh-huh.
get that sweet note a little bit, but then it turns to heat. And then I'm not really tasting any other note
Mhm.
outside of that.
It has a lingering finish, so it does linger, and I just get sort of this lingering, like it's got a little bit of a heavier mouthfeel. So like this lingering, like it's coated my mouth with sweetness and a little bit of heat.
Mhm.
I feel like there's two notes that they probably didn't mention, and that's regret and disappointment for me personally.
Oh,
I was
Regret
getting
and
more of a
disappointment.
cherry.
you go, Divya.
You say regret, but I'm getting more of a cherry.
Should you like
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, you said this was your favorite bourbon.
Who said I didn't like regret and disappointment, first of all?
Fair.
Anyway,
Quickly, I'll just point in, the
Yes.
only other bourbon I've tried on Bourbon and Breaches was Angel's Envy. And so I'm gonna rate this a 7.5. I think that the initial sip and taste, it is very smooth. And so for that, I'm liking it. It's pretty sippable, but on the aftertaste, it's definitely, as you alluded to, I don't know if there's a ton of complexity there. I can't speak to really the notes, but I do enjoy the smoothness of it, and it does have a good heat.
Did you like it more or less than Angel's Envy?
I think I liked it more. I believe I ranked the Angel's Envy around a 6.5.
you didn't like
Oh,
it
okay.
at all. Yeah, you
Not
don't like
really.
it.
So I'm
Do you taste the notes of regret?
Yeah, do you get a little regret on the palate? And
Disappointment.
Maybe on the back of the tongue, a
Or-
little.
Or
little
what
regret?
is your specific regret? Yeah,
So,
Shot,
I
yeah.
mean, as of now, no regret.
Is this
there
yours?
you go.
Oh, no, I don't drink.
This was poured for
Oh,
somebody.
okay.
But
All right.
what I remember of Maker's Mark, I
I
do
thought
think
you-
the
you-
cinnamon and nutmeg.
Cinnamon?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of cherry, cinnamon, spice.
And it comes through the nose at the end. It's not afterward.
Yes, it needs a splash of Coca-Cola, in my opinion.
Ooh,
Yeah, I know.
offensive.
I would agree with
Okay.
that.
All right. All right.
The only way to take makers is a double makers with Coke, sans Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ginger, whiskey, ginger. No,
Hold the Coke.
yeah, hold the. Today's episode sponsored not by Coke. All right, and that's been the bourbon break.
Okay, thank you for the feedback, everyone. Let's move on to story number 3. This is also something that I kind of like, but it's sad. It's sad, don't get me wrong.
Uh-oh.
But Activision confirms data breach exposing employee and game info. So not only are you gamers affected, it is your employees too. They suffered this data breach in early December 2022, and hackers gained access to the company's internal systems by tricking an employee with an SMS phishing text.
Dang.
That
I have some
dang
spicy,
submission.
I have spicy
Smashing.
thoughts,
I have
but
some
I'm
thoughts on it as
hearing
well.
everybody else, and then I'm gonna drop like the biggest thought that I have.
Quickly, initial thoughts on this. I know that Microsoft was looking into acquiring
Yep. Yep.
Activision. So I don't know if that is still just in the books.
Well,
or
the
if that's
government
affecting
was
the
looking
decision.
at blocking that. So I believe the SEC was trying to block that acquisition.
Ooh, tell us
Interesting.
more.
I'm curious to know your thoughts on why.
Too much, too many games on one platform and the ability for Microsoft
Monopolize.
to monopolize. Not that they would ever do that or attempt to do.
They know how good.
And it has not actually been blocked yet. But yes, they are trying to block it.
We're looking at it potentially. They're investigating.
They, yeah, for-
So this data breach is potentially.
You sound like our crypto friend. They're just investigating me.
Right. That they
I won't mention names.
This data breach is potentially highly lucrative or damaging, because if they were able to get access to source code, which I believe they were, that's the entire intellectual property of game companies. Game companies, the everything they sell is just compiled source code. And so if you can access the source code of Activision, you basically have all the wealth and value of Activision. So whenever you think of who can be most damaged by something like this, it's very much the game companies. And not only are you going to see that with clones, but you're going to see that potentially with exploits, kits, like a whole lot of stuff can come out of getting access to source code. So this is a pretty big deal. This isn't just like a normal company that gets breached. When they get breached, it's their whole value.
Right.
So I'll add 2 thoughts here. One, I think it's really interesting that right, we're finding out about this, but the employees are finding out at the exact same time. Because when I read further a little bit into this, it seemed like the employees didn't really know until the public disclosure was made. And that's always an interesting thing from a company perspective. I'm not saying they did it right or wrong or what they had to do, but I thought that was interesting if they found out at the same time. Because right, do you treat your employees in priority and notification or not? I'm not disagreeing one way or the other, just saying that's an interesting fact. The other is, it seems like that we've seen a larger target market for these ransomware attacks and these hacks amongst the gaming industry, right? You think about like Nvidia, right? Their entire network was taken over. You got Activision, you got some of these bigger gaming companies are being more targeted. And I think it might be more because, right, there's such a large consumer base of data there. It's an interesting trend.
Well, and they have a higher incentive to pay out. So if you ransom Activision, they have a higher incentive to pay out because all of their value is digital. It's very different than if you try to ransom Coca-Cola. Like Coca-Cola can still make Coca-Cola without computers. They started without computers. Like
Right.
It's a different value, and so it's a different threat.
Right.
John-
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting point to bring up, like seeing this trend moving towards that direction.
So
And-
I also, when we saw, I want to say that Epic Games is the breach or leak that solidified it, because after Epic, we started seeing like all these companies go down, like Pac-Man, Tekken, and all these, now Activision. And I wonder if all of this is correlated, because you still have bank information, on your apps. And then you also have chats, and chats is one thing that I've really thought about, because those like Microsoft or PSP, whatever, gaming chats are very toxic places. Like you
Back to your spicy TikTok channel.
yeah, no, it's worse than
Yes.
my TikTok channel, I promise
See?
you. But I feel like people can use that to blackmail regular players and be like, like now that we know that ChatGPT is storing information, maybe people are able to download all these conversations that they're having on the group chat. So I don't know, like, I mean, those are just some scenarios that are running in my mind, which would allow people to like pay ransom.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting point, right? Like you say there's financial information there, and nobody who's on those platforms probably thinks, oh, my financial information is on this platform. I need to secure it like a financial platform. Right? Like people think I got to secure it like a bank, but
Luke,
they
you were
don't.
saying-
I was going to say, regardless of whether some hacking entity would actually leverage chat logs in some way, the fact that those chats do exist and people do either say toxic things or simply reveal, aspects of their personality can increase their paranoia and increase dissatisfaction, disgruntlement among customers who hear about a breach, as opposed to if it was, some sort of thing where the texts are only like, when is the item shipping? Very, very personally intimate texts, which can increase the emotionality of a breach.
Well, and I think to that point, once again, we see consumers being hurt. And I don't hear a single word about what's going to be done to protect the gamers, right? So we all feel bad for the company, of course, but what about the gamers, right? And how long will the gamers be under threat for identity theft and fraud from this particular incident?
I actually had a thought about all of this, and I don't know if this is like the right thing to say, but I realized that like a lot of laws prevent people from testing with smishing and phishing and all that kind of stuff, right? This employee was tricked because of an SMS text. So how do we like feel about that situation when you are prevented from conducting smishing?
So we've spoken with some pretty sophisticated organizations that engage in phishing, and I've brought up smishing, and they say, well, that's hard because we have to get consent, and then we have to get everyone's cell phone numbers, and then that's not our device, and so it's sort of outside of our control. So like businesses are very much worried about how they could ever conduct smishing in a reliable way with personal devices, and hackers don't care. Hackers are just going to send you SMS. So yeah,
Wait, they don't ask consent first?
No, surprisingly enough, most hackers big into consent.
Reply stop to stop.
So
I
yeah,
reply stop to every hacker I get on my phone.
so the question, how can we deal with smishing if we can't simulate it, right? Like there's a number of ways that hackers can infiltrate companies that we can't simulate because of laws, right? Same thing with hack back. You can't, if a hacker's hacking you, you can't hack them back. That's illegal, right? So the security team is often handcuffed, and there's not a good way to handle that as far as I know. And there's also resistance even from some of the most sophisticated organizations to even talk about smishing because they don't have a good solution for it.
Story number 4, everybody. Login details of people, tech giants leaked in a 2 data.
Jesus.
So this is stupid. Like,
Right.
why does a data center actually have login details for any of their customers? That's stupid.
Correct.
I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'll stop talking now.
And then why do they say, well, what you need to do then is follow GDPR and be very secure? I mean,
Yes.
come on.
All right. I think we covered that story pretty well.
Yeah.
Don't keep login details in plain text. We feel bad for the victim, obviously, but like also, maybe don't leave important stuff laying around.
Well, especially data center wide.
Yeah.
Like, that's even worse.
I feel like we're focused a lot on the people that receive the infiltration. Bad hacker, bad. Don't do this and
Never again.
change your password.
He's gonna stop after now. All right, last story of the evening, everybody. Tying it with the spy balloon and what's happening with TikTok. A major global chip making supplier claims an employee stole manufacturing secrets. This is insider threat to the max. ASML currently restricts the sale of its machinery to China despite holding a near monopoly position in the global semiconductor industry. So how are you guys feeling about this? I know there's a lot of hot takes, so bring them on.
I sometimes see ASML TikToks and I'm not really into it, but like the audio is great.
Sorry, that's.
ASMR.
Oh,
Yes,
It's ASMR.
Joe
Keep that.
created and deployed.
Yeah, they use TikTok for the company blog distribution.
oh yeah.
So the only thing I can't figure out about the whole global chip distribution thing,
Closet regardless.
as you guys laugh about, right?
What's that? Jack?
I said the only thing I can't figure out about the global chip distribution issue is we have like 2 major chip manufacturers in the US. And I recognize that it's like a 3 nanometer chip versus a 2 nanometer chip. Yeah. And I haven't been completely up on it, but I'm always surprised when the supply chain and these issues come up with global suppliers. I recognize it takes a long time to reconfigure your factory to go from 2 to 3 or whatever you have to do, but I don't understand how it's that big of an issue, right? Like, if we built these, like the 4 companies went in on a conglomerate to build a chip factory out in New York or Pennsylvania, somewhere in there.
Right.
It was a multi-billion-dollar chip factory. Why are we still having this? Like, I don't understand that.
So chips are hard to build. The supply chain is hard to build. It often takes decades to produce the raw materials. And even though there's a lot of patentable stuff, a lot of businesses still run on trade secrets, including ours, right? Like there's methods and means that you figure out as a business that give you an advantage that you don't want known out there. We've mentioned Coca-Cola a few times, like their secret recipe, trade secret, right? And so I think that whenever a hacker can break into a business like this, chips are a hot topic. China would love to know how certain chips and chip suppliers do what they do. And so that can be sold for a top dollar. So like, I think it's very concerning, especially these days when chip manufacturing is almost being weaponized, that trade secrets can get access.
Especially for a company that has 90% of the market. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Trade secrets are a big deal. And that's the same thing with Activision. Their code base, right? Their code base was kept secret, right? So businesses still operate on secrets, and hackers love that because once they can steal it, they can sell it. This has been an episode of Bourbon and Data Breaches. If you liked everything you saw today, thanks to B for editing. If you hated everything you saw today, it's 2023. What are you going to do? Watch the news? Please like, follow, and subscribe. Bye.